I do must start and sit defense videos at the end of each week for two reasons. Number one is because there are still playable defenses that didn't make it inside of my top 12 defenses. And number two is because it's at the end of the week, which gives me a lot of time to assess injury reports and how each defense is looking. So we're going through every single matchup of the weekend, finding the must start and sit defenses. And I'm one of the only YouTubers who covers defense on a regular basis. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So the first matchup here, obviously we had the Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night. Hopefully you played the Buffalo Bills defense and sat the Dolphins defense. The 49ers at the Vikings is our first real matchup that we could do something about. The 49ers defense is a smash start this week. They were at the very tippy top tier of the top 12 defense rankings for a reason this week. I think there's two things that are really going into account here. Number one is the fact that they absolutely thwarted anything the Jets could do offensively in week one. They're going to do that exact same thing against the Minnesota Vikings because the Jets have Aaron Rodgers, the Vikings have Sam Darnold. And the other thing that makes this matchup so appealing to me for the 49ers defense is the fact that they had Sam Darnold last year. So they know how to prepare for this guy. They know what his weaknesses are. They know what his strengths are. So I think this is honestly going to be a really bad Sam Darnold game. And the 49ers are going to become a smash start this week. They are a total must-start defense in week 2 fantasy football. They're obviously massive favorites in this game. You can see the line on the screen right now. They're not going to lose this game. 49ers are an elite defensive play, and you stay away from the Vikings this week. This 49ers offense, I want nothing to do with playing a defense against this offense right now. The Seahawks are at the Patriots this week, and honestly, I think both of these defenses are very startable. The Seahawks were a top 5 defense for me personally. They have not moved much. The Seahawks defense looked legit last week for sure. They obviously made Bo Nix look like a rookie, and I mean, how can you say that Jacoby Brissett is going to be much better than Bo Nix? Like, even the fact that it is at home in New England should provide a more comfortable spot for Jacoby Brissett to play, but the Seahawks defense has dudes, man, and Mike Macdonald was a good defensive coordinator for the Ravens last year. Obviously, I didn't think it was going to work week 1, but I'm already convinced that it does work, so the Seahawks are definitely a must start. I wouldn't say the Patriots are a must start. You can start them because the Seahawks, honestly, like they're not fantastic offensively. If you saw that game last week and if you played the Broncos defense last week in fantasy, you actually did pretty good. Broncos defense was all over the Seahawks. And I don't particularly think the Patriots defense is the primary weakness of their team. I actually think it's the strength of their team. So to me, the Patriots are startable, but they're not exactly must starts like the Seattle Seahawks are. Now, the Giants go to Washington to take on the Commanders this week, and I said it, man, this is a really shaky start. You can start the Commanders this week because obviously it all comes down to the fact that Daniel Jones looks atrocious. He looks absolutely atrocious. So just for that reason alone, the Commanders probably can take the ball away once or twice, maybe 3 times on the high end. But the Commanders defense is probably one of the weakest of the entire league. Like, they're horrible defensively. So overall, I would just say approach this one cautiously a little bit because I am not wild on the Commanders defense, but I am big on the matchup itself. Now, the Giants defense, I really do think is playable. Is playable defense. Obviously, I looked bad last week saying the Giants were playable against the Vikings. I still think the Giants actually have a pretty good defense. The problem that they have is similar to the Jets past several years. Their defense just gets worn down when their quarterback can't do anything. So I think that this game could be a better situation. Jayden Daniels is a rookie. He did look lights out last week running the ball, and he threw the ball pretty well. I do think the Giants can be played this week, but I would not play them before I played the Commanders defense. The Los Angeles Chargers at the Carolina Panthers. This is a lock start. You play the Chargers defense. They were my number 1 defense on the week, and they are still my number 1 defense on the week. They're going to Carolina. Who cares? I don't care if it's a home game. I don't care if it's in Brazil. This game is going to be a beatdown. The Chargers are going to absolutely destroy the Panthers, and I just think that the Chargers defense proved how good they were last week against a weak Raiders offense, but a divisional opponent when divisional games are always a little bit shaky to figure out. So The Chargers defense is an absolute certainty. And speaking of absolute certainties, Underdog has CeeDee Lamb's line right now at 0.5 total yards against the New Orleans Saints this weekend. So obviously you need to smash that higher. And if you're not on Underdog yet and you want to take advantage of this line, use the link in the comments below. And when you use code FFN to deposit at least $10, they'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. And you'll be able to take advantage of that free CeeDee Lamb line. So go down there, use the link in the comments, and use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. Now, our next matchup here is the New Orleans Saints at the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys defense, I still think, can be played. You look at the box score last week for the Saints, obviously you're not going to want to play a defense against the Saints because you're like, they almost put up 50 points last week. The reality is that the Saints offense, I still don't believe, is a revelation. They may end up being better than I thought they would be before the season, but I also think that the Cowboys defense just looked so much better than I thought they would last week. Now, they had a pretty easy matchup against the Browns because Deshaun Watson is abysmal. He's an embarrassment for the league. But the Cowboys defense still does look really strong, and they do have a great DC with Mike Zimmer over there. So I ultimately just have lots of confidence in the Cowboys defense, and I have confidence in the Saints defense, but not against the Cowboys in Dallas. I don't have that feeling because last week they looked like a well-oiled machine, and they were in Cleveland in a hostile environment. So come back home to Dallas, I just don't see it this week for the Saints. I'd rather take the shot on another defense. The Indianapolis Colts at the Green Bay Packers is our next matchup here. And the Indianapolis Colts, they're a good start. I've gone really back and forth on the Colts defense. Like, I don't love their defense this year. I don't think that they made enough personnel moves in the offseason for me to feel really wild about them. They obviously were great last year, and last week they did get after CJ Stroud, which makes me feel good about this one because Malik Willis is the starting quarterback for the Packers. What are y'all doing? Honestly, I don't know what the Packers are doing here by playing Malik Willis. I would personally rather go outside Ryan Tannehill and just play him rather than playing Malik Willis. But this is good for the Colts defense for sure. Colts defense are going to be able to get after Malik Willis. Yeah, he can move, but this dude is really bad under pressure. He's just not a very good quarterback. So yeah, this is a pretty strong matchup for the Colts. And the Packers, even if they didn't have the Jordan Love issue, keeping that defense on the field a bunch this game, I wouldn't play them anyways. Packers defense still looks pretty soft to me. So I'm just going to go ahead and say you sit the Packers defense until we actually see some really tough level play from their defense, if we see it at all. Now, the Browns go to Jacksonville to take on the Jags, and the Jags are in a very similar spot as the Washington Commanders for me, where it's like the matchup says to play them. It says that you can play them. They're not must-start defense either. Jacksonville's defense, I still don't think is very good either. I think that Foyesade Aluakon and Josh Allen are not going to be good enough to carry this defense as a collective unit to a lot of good fantasy weeks. In IDP, that's different. But a collective unit in fantasy football defenses, they're not going to lead them to many fantasy points in many weeks. And I still don't think they'll be exactly great against the Browns this week. Like, I'd be surprised if they came up with, like, more than a turnover. But ultimately, like I said earlier, Deshaun Watson is an embarrassment. I mean, he is an absolute embarrassment for the league. He's got one of the most expensive contracts in league history, and he is an absolutely atrocious player. I feel bad for Browns fans, actually. So, I think the Jags are a good play, and I think you can flex. You could possibly play the Browns because the Browns defense is really good. Now, obviously, last week they got beaten down by the Dallas Cowboys, but the Jacksonville offense is still, I'm not sold on. I'm just not sold on them. So I think the Browns will be fine in this game. I think they'll keep it relatively close, but I wouldn't say that I would be planning to play the Browns over a defense like the Indianapolis Colts or even the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. The New York Jets go to Tennessee to take on the Titans this week. The Jets defense is a good play. I think the Jets defense is a really good start this week. There's a couple reasons for it. Number one, Will Levis, I think there is something there with him. I think he does have talent, and he has arm talent. Like, he made some good throws last week, but they were few and far between, and he is a mistake-prone guy. He was a mistake-prone guy in Kentucky, and it showed last week. He made some ugly throws, and the Bears defense is what brought them back into that game to actually win. The Jets defense got thoroughly embarrassed on Monday night versus the 49ers. They're going to be mad. They're really mad, and they're still really talented. Like, I don't think that you should look at that game against the 49ers in week 1 in San Francisco on Monday night as a blueprint for the Jets' worst defense that we all expected. The Jets defense is going to be fine. They're going to come out with their hair on fire against the Titans. And honestly, I think the Titans, as I've been saying for weeks now, good sleeper defense. The way that the Jets offense played, I think that the Jets are going to be much better this week, so I wouldn't go out and try to start the Titans. Like, I would probably start the Browns defense over the Titans defense, but I also think that the Titans defense is not bad. I don't think they're a bad defense. So I would say you can play them in a pinch if you're in like a 16 or 18 team league or something like that. But if you're in a 12 team league and you have access to a defense like the Jacksonville Jaguars, I would stay away from Tennessee's defense. Now, going to our next matchup here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. You don't play either defense. You don't play the Bucs defense, even though they're really good, but Detroit's offense is just too high-powered, too good, too many weapons. And the Lions defense just didn't show me enough, but I do think they're on the right track. Now, the Bucs offense, I think their offense is obviously running really well right now with Baker. Even without Dave Canales, they look really good offensively. So I would just say, don't take the chance. Why take the chance when there's better matchups? Sit both these defenses. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens this week is a smash defensive play. Absolutely smash play. The Ravens are massive favorites in this game at home against a bad offense. There's really not much else to say other than the fact that the Ravens defense is good. Again, it's like looking at the Jets last week. You can't take the game against Kansas City in the home opener and say, yeah, the Baltimore Ravens defense sucks. It's like everybody looks bad against Mahomes. I think people understand that, so we'll just move on. And the Raiders defense, this is not their week. You stay out of the Ravens' way. Under no circumstances do you play the Raiders defense this week. The Los Angeles Rams go to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. I think you sit both of them. Divisional matchup, I don't love either defense either. So there's just no reason to risk this one. Cardinals defense looks bad. Rams defense looks worse than I thought they would. So I would just stay away. Let this one play out for another couple weeks, specifically with the Rams that I do think have starter potential in the future. The Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. You can play the Chiefs defense because of how bad historically the Bengals have been at the start of the season, and because the Chiefs defense is just really freaking good with Steve Spagnuolo as the defensive coordinator. I wouldn't personally do it though, because maybe it's a pipe dream. I really do think the Bengals could start to snap out of their early season blunders because they're taking on the Chiefs this week. If they come out and lay an egg against the Chiefs, there's going to be guys on the hot seat over there. So I do think they'll get up for this game, and I do think they'll play well. So I would just say the Chiefs are not the best this week. They'll have other good weeks in the future. And the Bengals defense, based on what they did last week, I'm embarrassed that I put them at the top of the list last week. So you stay away from the Bengals defense at all freaking costs. The Pittsburgh Steelers go to Denver this week to take on the Broncos, and both of these defenses are 100% playable. Both of them. The Steelers defense looked great. I mean, really, it was mostly Watt that was on fire last week. Watt opens up everything for that defense. I mean, TJ Watt is an absolute he's a menace. I mean, he is a nightmare for opposing offensive coordinators, quarterbacks, offensive linemen. Like, he is just a nightmare. Against the Broncos offense and a rookie quarterback, I'm going to trust that the Steelers are a good start, and this has the lowest over-under of the week. So I think that the defensive plays in both situations are really good because the Broncos are at home, and they have Pat Surtain guarding George Pickens, taking away their only real legitimate wide receiver threat in this offense. And the Broncos, again, last week, they were really good defensively. They kept them in that game for a good amount of that time. So the Broncos defense is not some slouch. They're actually pretty good this year. It's not the same defense that gave up 70 points to the Dolphins last year. It's a much different looking defense. That's why they're both playable this week in a very low scoring matchup. The Chicago Bears at the Houston Texans on Sunday Night Football. Similar situation to how I feel about the Chiefs defense or the Browns defense. I think you could play the Texans defense. I actually have contemplated moving them up in my rankings this week because the Texans are taking on the Bears on Sunday night. And I mean, Caleb looked like a rookie last week. He did. There's no way around that. He really, really looked stressed. And I think that Caleb will be better in like the month of October or November this year. But going to Houston on Sunday night to take on CJ Stroud and that defense, that's a tall task, man. So I would say that Houston is actually a pretty strong play defensively this week if you don't have access to any of those top 10, top 8 teams this week. And the Bears defense, it's just not the week, man. It's not the week. I love the Bears defense. The Bears defense looks fantastic, but you don't go to Houston on Sunday night and expect to shut down the Texans in their own house. I would be absolutely shocked if that ended up happening. I would stay away from the Bears this week. And the last matchup of the week, the Falcons go to Philly to take on the Eagles. And the Eagles are a startable defense for a couple reasons. Number one, I think their defense is better than what we saw last Friday in Brazil. The Packers offense with Jordan Love is really freaking good. It's really freaking good. So the Eagles just had a tougher matchup in a bad environment in Brazil. That field was so slippery. Everyone was slipping around. It was just a nasty game. So I think that personally, the Eagles defense is going to look better this week against the Falcons, a team that didn't look good offensively last week, and Kirk Cousins' primetime record is atrocious. So I know how Kirk looks on primetime. I say the Eagles are definitely startable this week, and the Falcons defense, you stay away. They looked horrible against the Steelers defense, and they're not getting better in Philly on Monday night. So let me know how your team is looking so far this week. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings to see where all these defenses lined up this week, click on this video right here.